If you clicked on this video, you've probably had a pipe freeze and burst, flood your house, or have known somebody that has had that happen. So in this next series of videos, I'm going to kind of walk you through a lot of the process and what you have to do when that happens, and things to consider while your house is torn apart. This is a great opportunity to make some changes or even potentially do some upgrades. I'm also going to post a lot of before and during progress pics at the end of this video, so check those out. So aside from the obvious and calling the insurance company and getting some of the initial details worked out, the first thing you're going to do is get a restoration company in and start the demolition process. You're going to want to tear out everything that has potentially gotten wet and get that all dried out. In most cases, when you have a pipe burst, it's going to flood part of your house and the water can potentially get to 2 or 3 inches deep, in which most cases the insurance company is going to pay for you to cut about 2 foot up the wall, which is what we did right here. Now, in this particular case, the leak actually froze right above the shower there, and so part of the water was actually coming down the wall, which is why we had to tear that section out. As I was saying in the beginning of the video, this is going to be a great time to make any changes since your house is halfway torn apart. Once you get the number back from your insurance company and you know what they're going to pay for, and then you can discuss your budget with your contractor. To give you a quick example, on this particular job, they had a single shower fiberglass insert, kind of small, and they didn't like it and they were wanting to do something bigger. I made the suggestion of opening it up and moving the walls out a little bit and doing more of a traditional shower with tile. On top of that, they also wanted to go ahead and rework the master and guest room closets, which is what we're demoing right here. Insurance on this job was going to pay for new flooring to replace what they have in the other room and half of the master. We thought this would be a good opportunity to go ahead and upgrade and do some nice LVP throughout the house. Some of this came up relatively easy and some did not. Lucky for me, got a little bit of muscle, so we got it done. At this point, we've got about 95% of the demo done, so we're going to go ahead and start framing up some of the new walls for the closets. I have a lot of experience and a handful of trades, framing not really being one of them. This job right here, none of the framing that I was required to do was any load-bearing walls, so really it was just more about getting everything squared up and secured best I could. So if you are a professional framer and you're watching this video and you've got some tips for me, leave some comments below and help me out. I'm always looking to learn. I'm doing about 80% of the work on this remodel. The only things that I personally won't attack is electrical and plumbing. We have licensed people for that. All right, last thing to do is get these walls anchored to the floor. All right, all the framing, insulation, plumbing, and electrical work is done, so we're just getting the sheetrock put up so we can start taping bedding. So I thought on this job it might be a good opportunity to give a few pointers when taping a bedding. I think a lot of people watch this kind of stuff and they think it's super easy. And it's not overly hard, but it is harder than a professional will make it look. Tip number 1, make sure you get plenty of mud over the joint and behind the tape. If you have any places behind the tape that doesn't have mud, you're going to get what we call a blister. And when you go to texture and paint, it is definitely going to show. Tip 2, when you go to wipe the tape, it's called mashing, not smashing. Okay, so you want to wipe it firmly, but you're not trying to get every ounce of mud out from behind the tape. You just want it flat. Just a side note, this is not spackle, which some people will buy to repair small holes in your walls. This is called joint compound, or as what most of us in the industry would refer to as mud. So we're going to finish spotting these nails real quick, and I'm going to give you all a quick walkthrough. At this point, we've got everything pretty much taped. The shower guys came, got all the hardy backer in, and next thing we're going to do is float all the joints out. So tip number 3, and this is what we call part of the pre-bed. This is going to be the first coat of mud you're going to put over the joint. Most of the time, I'll use a 8-inch knife to apply the mud, and then I'm going to come back with my 12-inch knife and wipe it nice and flat. Also, there are different types of joints, so how you go about attacking that will vary. On a long joint, that is typically where 2 fresh pieces of rock come together. They're perforated on the edge, so therefore they're not going to take near as much mud to make those flat, which is why I use an 8-inch knife to apply the mud and wipe with my 12. In situations like this is fairly equivalent to what you might consider a butt joint. That is where two ends of the sheetrock come together. Typically, you're going to have a little bit of a hump because they're not perforated. So you're going to use your 12-inch knife and kind of set it over the joint and see where you need to float that joint out. Depending on what the hump looks like will determine where you place your mud on which side of the joint. But the goal here is to float it wide enough to where you minimize the appearance of the joint. When you texture and paint it, you don't want to be able to see it. I will say, speaking from experience, most people that aren't familiar with bedding probably leave too much mud on and then therefore have to do a ton of sanding. And just like any seasoned tape and bedder, you're definitely going to have to know how to walk on stilts. So here we are, day 2 of the tape and bed process. We did the pre-bed yesterday. So right here, I'm starting out with going ahead and mudding up all the angles. Opted to do this first before I started floating out the joints. There's no particular order that you have to do it. It's just the way I chose to do it. I do, however, prefer to do all my uppers first, so I thought I'd go ahead and mud up the angles, spot on my nails, and float all the joints, and then work my way down. If you're thinking the sheetrock on this ceiling looks a little weird, it is. We were trying to avoid the light, but since we had moved the walls and everything else, we had to recenter the light anyways. Probably should just went ahead and cut one solid piece of sheetrock, and wouldn't have been near as many small little joints like this, but I'm pretty good at floating stuff out, so it'll work out. All right, so as promised, we're going to do a little progression pics. These are kind of how we started. You can see as we tore the walls out and started removing the shower area, we got all that newly framed in, and we expanded the shower. It was like a 2x3, and now it's a 5x5, so it's going to be really nice. As for the other closets, this was the master. We opened that up. They wanted to take the guest closet and make it a little smaller and expand on the master. Appreciate y'all watching. Part 2 next.